I'd like to call to order the March 29th public hearing of the City of Tampa's Barrio Latino Commission. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rich Simmons, Chair of your commission. If you are here to present a project, you will have limited time to make your presentation, so we suggest being thorough but concise. When coming to the microphone, you will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project. The commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation. Your project should be presented in the following order: site plan, elevation, architectural details, wall sections. Staff presents a staff report. We will then ask for public comment. Following your presentation, the commissioners will then be asking questions in the same order as your presentation. Please state and spell your name clearly for the record. If you are here to speak for or against the project, because your time will be limited to 3 minutes. Take some time now to summarize your comments, because 3 minutes goes by very quickly. Following public comment, the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The public hearing will then be closed. The only comments which will be allowed after the public hearing is closed will be in response to any questions from the commissioners. The commissioners will then discuss the case and make their decision based upon the city ordinance, chapter 27 of the city zoning code, the design guidelines, the Secretary of Interior standards, design review comments, and the testimony given today at this public hearing. The BLC can only act on items that are within our specific jurisdictional responsibility. Owner agents are independently responsible to obtain any permits and/or approvals. If you haven't already done so, please silence all cell phones. We'll start with the introduction of my commissioners, starting on my left.
Liz Welch.
Good morning, I'm Leaving Wynn.
Good morning, Jose Gelat.
Morning, Jose Perez.
And from city staff, we have Dennis Fernandez, Ron Vila, Beverly Jusak, and Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from City Legal. Okay, we have our minutes in the packet in front of you. So everyone had a chance to review them from last week's meeting, so it should be fresh in everyone's mind.
So motion to approve the minutes from Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022.
Second.
All in favor of approving such minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries by unanimous consent. Mr. Fernandez.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. I'll be brief. Thank you for working with us on coordinating this special call public hearing in order to kind of catch our cases up with the volume that we've been experiencing. It became necessary. We will be holding our regular meeting back again in April. We'll be back on regular track for April 26th at 9 a.m. I did want to let you know that we do have an additional commissioner going through the appointment process right now. Mr. Tom Hammer with Rowe Architects is going to be filling the historic preservationist seat on the board, and he'll be a mayoral appointment, and he still has to be affirmed through City Council, but we're expecting that prior to your next meeting, so hopefully he'll be joining you then. With that, I believe we can move on to the disclosure of ex parte communication and conflicts of interest.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. Will the Commissioners please state whether or not they have any conflicts of interest regarding any of the items that are on the agenda? Additionally, will the Commissioners please state whether or not they've had any ex parte communication regarding any of the items that are listed on the agenda? Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Vila, I'm staff with Historic Preservation. At this time, we're ready for the swear-in. Everybody that wishes to testify, please stand up and raise your right hand, including staff.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing this morning is the truth and nothing but the truth?
We are ready to move to the first case this morning, which is BLC 22-33. This is for the address of 2607 North 20th Street. Currently, it's a vacant parcel. It has the YC2 zoning attached to it. The request this morning is for a certificate of appropriateness for a primary structure with site improvements. The overall square footage is approximately 1,200 square foot for the primary structure. Moving to the photo presentation. I have the 1929 Sanborn map up. The red line indicates the northern boundary of the local district. The property in question is here in this shaded green box. It is an internal lot. To the north, you have Michigan 1929, which is Columbus Drive. To the west, you have 20th Street. There is an alley that runs east and west, abutting the subject site. And then to the south, you have 15th Avenue. This is to get you familiar with the concentration of what was there in 1929. Just to the west, you see the convent site. About 20 years ago, there was a building that was in ruins there that used to house the Salesian Sisters. That was removed, and as part of the mitigation for the interstate coming through and displacing some of the homes, we relocated and created a block face all in here. So the majority of these homes that are just to the west are relocated houses through a joint venture with FDOT and the city of Tampa. You'll see the setbacks associated with those houses and how we relocated those and put them back in a sensitive manner. And then you see the fabric that was here in 1929, that's still prevalent there in some of the housing stock today. So the setbacks are very important as you look at the established pattern, what was there, and then what is there today as well. This is looking at that overhead shot of today. Subject site is obviously in this green box. You see the fabric that's currently there that used to be the convent site, and you see the inventory that was replaced back into the community with the interstate coming through and displacing a lot of those homes. And then you see the current situation with the setbacks along Columbus Drive. We're going to look at this parcel now, and then the next case is the subject site is right here. So both the first two will be concentrated in this area. I'll show photo as this here is looking at 20th Street back into the subject site. The site has some challenges as the owner and agent addressed the board this morning. They'll show the dimensions of the parcels and some of the concerns and challenges that they had in getting new construction into the site. Just looking towards the north from the subject site. Looking at the historic materials, the brick streets and the granite curbing that are in place. Subject site is to the right. This is looking to the north to Columbus Drive. This is looking to the south. You see the interstate here. Some of the relocated homes are to the right, and then the setbacks that are established today with the abutting structures on the same side of 20th Street. This is one of the houses that was relocated. It had a corner presence at its prior home site, and then we brought it to a corner. You see the generous wraparound porch, and then you see the setback of that porch, although it's not the front of the house, but I think this will be discussed through the presentation, the setback established on 20th Street. That concludes the photo presentation. At this time, I believe the agent's going to address the board.
Good morning. I'm Thomas Miller, builder, and I have here
I'm Manuel Alvarino.
the architect. Okay. All right, once again, my name is Thomas Miller, builder for this project, 2607 North 20th Street. Site plan, we do have a challenging lot. This lot records at 63 by 42. We also have a camper's tree, which we've already got approved for removal by Natural Resources that sits in the middle of both lots. We have a 5-foot setback. We were trying to stay within the rhythm of the neighborhood with the setback and the porch, so it's at 5 foot. Mr. Avila mentioned that. The house across the street that runs straight down 20th there on the left. So the setback aligns with the new bill also off of Columbus as well. So we took that in consideration as well to keep the alignment off the house that's proposed on Columbus, and we're in the rear of it and then on the side. So we kept that rhythm going. Parking is located on the south side of the residence in the alleyway. So right here. Granite curbing, which we would depress in place, we keep that there. Rear stoop. Okay. Do you have any questions about the site plan for us? Anything?
Kamaria Pettis-Mackle from the City Attorney's Office. You have whatever time is remaining for you to conduct your presentation, and then later, after the staff
Okay.
provides the information, the board can ask you questions.
Okay. All right, the elevation, rear stoop. We've added the handrails to accommodate 4 more risers. Detail will be shown on 2220 East 9th Avenue railings. Give you the detail. Bathroom window, it will be a 5'4". Front of the elevation here. There'll be opaque glass, textured, single horn, gel one window. Also below the board band, smooth stucco finish with brick veneer, located here. Smooth finish stucco. We did also kind of alter the roof a little bit. We added a shed roof here to fit the time and the period of the area as well, with 4x4 columns, which are going to be trimmed out. Overhang was shortened, and it have a drip edge as well. And materials would be gel one cladded window type, door be a wooden door, asphalt shingles, and hardy board and concrete fiber board, and it's at 5 inches. Okay, also on your south elevation, we added the 2 windows here. Originally, we didn't have any windows on the south elevation, and we added that for the time period as well. And to my understanding, I think they possibly might have to be moved at least 2 foot from the end. We're willing to adjust that as well. We are aware of that, so we do the adjustments there. Is there anything else I'm missing? Okay. 4 is actually the east elevation with the porch and the risers that we discussed. Once again, the detail of the railings. will mimic the railings here. I don't know if you can see. So that's the railing detail and that shed roof. So, here, the detail that we changed in the front. I think that's it.
Okay, here we have a wall section for your reference using it's a good frame, a house on a stone wall. If you see on the elevation, the fake pier is a brick veneers and stucco. And also here we can see the dimensions of the windows, trims, and we're using a historical seal. Here we detail the front railing. And this is a sample also, it's a picture of the window that we're gonna use with trims, the siding, and the corner board. Yeah. And here, I know that it's in black and white, but that's the color palette. We are using a white for trim and a green, a light green for the house. We have a sample here of the soffit. We're gonna use a hardy soffit. Also, we have sample for the siding. This is the sample for the Techo triple glass window for the bathroom. And this is a sample for the vinyl, the column wrap. A sample for a stereo door. As someone mentioned before, we use those residents as a reference for our design. Nothing is done. Did you have any question?
As legal indicated before, this is your presentation. You make our presentation to us, and questions will follow later, so.
Yeah, we have, I think we are.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah,
much it.
we are done. We are done.
Mr. Vila, would you like to present?
Thank you, Rich. Ron Avila, staff with Historic Preservation. Staff finding this application is consistent with the Ybor City Design Guidelines. We reviewed some plans at the beginning of this year. Since they modified their plans slightly, what you've seen this morning. And I'd like to go through some of the concerns that we had prior, and then I believe a lot of the changes were reflected on the drawings that you saw this morning. So in working with this small lot, 42 by 63, they came forward, they accommodated parking on site, and there's no variances attached to this request. The front yard setback for YC2 is 10 foot from the front property line. There is no established rhythm, so we could do a front yard averaging. But there is another tool that zoning has that we could decrease the front yard from the YC2 10-foot setback to 5-foot setback that's more consistent with the abutting environment there. So they're requesting a 5-foot to be consistent, but no additional action is needed from this board. In looking at the plans initially, they had selected a model, and the model is more of a earlier 1900s house with a steep roof and minor overhangs. The columns need to be adjusted that are reflected on the drawings this morning, so they were simplified, and they incorporated a shed roof to be consistent with that style. It's more like of a Railroad National architectural style. On the lower first floor facing 20th Street, they have a bathroom there. Instead of making the window a little smaller, they used some stippled glass that was on their illustration, but I don't believe it was called out, but the information is there. They discussed incorporating a brick into the foundation. We would need to see an example of that brick if this is to move forward for a final. The front facade was very flat in the original application. So the main gable, if you could put the front elevation up. The gable in the front behind the porch is offset about 5 foot to give some depth and some reveal to that facade. If you remember the Sanborn that I showed too, the illustration of the structure that was there in 1929 had the main square footage facing 20th Street, but it had a dog leg to it as well, because at that time it was a challenging lot as well. We had some concerns. The south elevation had no penetrations. This morning, they showed 2 windows on that south elevation. There is the historic fabric there. It's one of the a lower percentage of streets that has the brick and the granite there. So the granite, when they incorporate their apron, needs to be depressed in place so the city knows where their granite is, and they could put their curb cut there. And if he could just go through his wall section again from the ridge to the foundation, just calling out all the materials as far as the shingle roof, the soffit material, the corner boards, things of that nature. I believe all the information is there. It just needs to be expressed at the meeting this morning. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Vila. Is anyone here from the public wishing to comment on the case? Please identify yourself. Seeing none. We're going to start asking questions of your application, starting with Mr. Perez on my right.
I really don't have any questions. I just have you mentioned the lot next to this one is also going to be presented today. Is it the same house?
No, it's different.
It's different?
Different model.
Different footprint? Okay. No more comments.
Thank you. Just a quick question, since it's a little hard to discern from the drawings that you're being presented. Are you proposing open rafter tails on the eaves, or is it a closed soffit?
It's a closed soffit.
Okay, because the section you have up, like on the porch, appears to me to be an open, doesn't have a fascia board, on the, like on the porch.
Or in the porch is open.
Okay, so you've chosen to
We-
go open on the porch, but then closed on the second.
In this, yes.
Okay, and the reason for that?
We are using, for the other model, we are using, we show the rafter tails. So
And-
we try to make something different for this property. So we are working at the same time on both property, and we are trying to make it different.
Have you seen other examples of historic houses in the neighborhoods where you have those two different kinds of conditions? Because normally it would be the same expressed throughout the whole structure.
I don't have in mind now, yes.
And actually, I mean, now that you've zoomed in on the second floor, it does appear to be open rafter tails, is what you're presenting.
Yes, those are the sample that we reference, so,
No, but if you could go back to the section,
Yes.
the second floor, now that it's zoomed in, what you're showing is an open rafter tail.
no, that's used for the overhang in the gable end.
Oh,
You're talking about
above the porch?
Yes.
Okay, okay, thank you for the clarification. That's the only question I have.
Are both stories framed for this?
Yes.
Okay, and so the window detail will be the same for both stories. Could you talk about the opaque glass at the restroom on the first floor? Is it gonna be a different color because it's opaque, or is it just gonna be like a frosted texture? Exactly what? will
It's a
that be?
texture.
It's a frosted texture?
Yes.
Okay, so the window itself will be the same color?
It's the same
as
color.
the rest of them, all right. And with that, I think that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have anything.
Okay, let's start off with the site plan, please. Okay, so you don't have to zoom in that much. You can zoom out. So we're good.
Okay.
There you go. Thanks. Okay, so from the photographs and maybe some of your testimony, you said that there's an oak tree that's on site.
Campers. It's not an oak, it's
Is
a
it
campers.
Campus?
Yes.
Okay. And you're working with the city to remove that tree right now? And is that like in between the two property lines?
Yes,
It's right on the line? Okay.
correct.
All right, so you have your side porch, really 20th is your front, right? It's your front yard?
Correct.
So the house to the south of this, are you aligned with the porch? I think you had let's go into your block average diagram.
It's an alley.
Right. So the house across the street, we've seen that in your presentation in northwest, correct?
Yes.
What's the setback there on that house?
Okay, what we measure is, because we don't have the property line, we measure from the edge of the porch
Sure.
to the edge of the curb.
Okay.
And right now is 15 feet 9 inches.
Okay, and how does that compare with your setback
And we
if you
we
measure the
place
same way?
our to 18 feet
18
from the
feet?
edge of the curb to the edge of the porch.
Okay, and what about the house further south, that blue one?
There are no house there. It is a commercial.
Right,
I
it's an
mean-
alley, and
What's
then
that?
it's like some type of commercial.
Yeah, further down the street. Because,
Interstate.
what we're looking
There's
for
a
is,
road, then an interstate.
Mr. I can see that blue house that's there. Because you can't really say you're gonna block average setback from Columbus, you're really more applicable to 20th.
There you go.
So that blue house right there, before it hits us, what did you measure there?
It is similar. It is lined out with our face of our house.
That may not be a contributing structure.
It's not
True.
it's not lined out with our porch. It's lined out with the face of the wall of the house,
Face of the house, but not the
Yes.
porch?
not the porch.
Okay. And then, okay, so let's jump back to the site plan again then. I'm sorry. Okay, so you have 5 foot off the property line and then 12-foot porch, and then you have a 5-foot roof extension there, so it actually comes out to the gable end, which you showed us in the wall section. Okay. Okay, look, okay, that's fine. Let's go to the elevations, please. You can zoom out a little bit so we can see all of them. Okay, so I think this was an improvement from our previous iteration on your, I don't know which east elevation? Should be your west elevation. So that gable end projects out 5 feet from before, it's not flat. Like you made that change, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what's your overhangs here? Because they look very tiny and I'm not sure.
In the porch? Or
You can start there.
in the porch is 1 foot and 8 inches for the roof.
Okay. And is that overhang typical for this higher pitched roof in the
Yes,
district?
yes.
Is that what happens on that house across the street with the wraparound porch on the opposite corner?
No, I don't know. We don't know. Yeah, we use this as a sample. This house have a high pitch, and the overhang is about 8
Small.
inches too. And this other house, the overhang for the gable end is 1 foot, so
Okay.
that's what we made for the overheads on here for the gable ends.
So it's 8 inches everywhere except for the gable end. You put another 4 inches on there to bring that out, and that's got an exposed rafter tail. So, so you have enclosed soffits. There's no gutters. There's just a drip edge.
Correct, no gutters.
Yeah, correct.
No gutters.
Mhm.
Okay, and I like what you've done with the windows, adding a couple windows to the south elevation. I think that, and the spacing, I think looks good there. Question on that, I know we've addressed it a little bit on that stippled glass. It's still gonna be clear glass, right? It's not
No,
gonna-
it's opaque, but it's translucent.
Okay, but it's not gonna be blue. It's gonna be
No, it's gonna be
clear.
white.
Right, well, clear.
clear, yeah.
Okay.
No, I think it's gonna be frosted,
It's
right?
frosted,
Right.
but it's
But-
white.
But it's not gonna be a stippled frosted blue glass
Right,
or
right.
shade. It's gonna
No.
be the same color as everything else. Okay. Okay. All right, that's all I have. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we've asked some questions of your presentation here. You have a few minutes if you want to summarize any comments, and then we're gonna close the public hearing and discuss the case.
Just thank you for your time.
What was that?
Say, just thank you for your time.
Okay,
Appreciate you
okay.
guys.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. We can start with a discussion of the case, starting with Ms. Welch.
No, I think they worked with staff well for some of the detailing. I think it'll continue to work with staff that will be successful home in addition into the district.
Yes, I agree. I think it's kind of a unique situation. I'm glad to see that the neighborhood is, or the project and the one we're about to see are going to kind of add a little bit of density. And as a consequence, the house is sort of a hybrid. It's kind of like a two-story casita. So although initially I had some reservations about the different treatment of soffits, I think there is enough precedent, given the scale of the houses, that it's going to look very much in place.
Just a great improvement to the neighborhood, and I'm good with everything you've shown.
Yeah, I think the latest round of improvements and changes that they did by bringing that side yard, front yard / combination entry off of 20th, bringing that out really made the difference. I really kind of had an issue before when the roof was all one pitch and didn't have any breakdown. And I think there's other kind of roofing types, but now you can see their precedent of what they're going for with the period-specific house. I think that makes a lot more sense. So that little 5-foot jet out there of the roof line really, brings us together here. So I think, whatever our motion is to maintain that, make sure that they continue to work with staff on pallets and some of these details.
So we'll move to grant a certificate of final approval with conditions, move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in BLC 22-33 for the property located at 2607 North 20th Street, with the following conditions: that the applicant continues to work with staff on finishes and color selection, hardware, that type of thing. Based on the following finding of the fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Ybor City design guidelines of the City of Tampa, based on the following reasons: that it conforms with the design criteria for the new construction addition in terms of height and width, facade width, setback, spacing, alignment, similarity of details and forms, and building materials. Yep.
I'll second it, and I'm wondering if we should list the few conditions that came up as,
What else would you like to add?
well, I'll go ahead and add, I had,
Kamaria Pettismaco from the City Attorney's Office. So before you second, you're going to ask if he can amend his motion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Would you be willing
Sure,
to amend
yes.
your motion with the following conditions that I'm going to recommend? That would include provide staff with a brick sample for the pier, provide staff with a sample of the opaque glass being suggested for the front elevation, that the windows and the drawings presented reflect at least a 2-foot offset from the corners, as was talked about, and then also the skirt details for the porch. I found that the drawings are rather graphic and abstract. If they could provide additional detailing for the staff, that would be helpful.
Do you accept the amendment?
I do.
Okay, and now you can second the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. All in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ron Milo, staff with Historic Preservation, moving to the next agenda item, which is BLC 22-35. This is for the address of 2001 East Columbus Drive. This also has the YC2 zoning classification. The request is for a certificate of appropriateness for new construction for a primary structure with site improvements, and this structure's approximately 1,300 square foot. Moving to the Sanborn map. So the property we just looked at is here. We're moving to the north one parcel. This is a legal lot of record, checked with zoning as the prior one was. This is on the corner of Columbus Drive and 20th Street. This does have an established front yard pattern that I tried to illustrate last time, and just showing the Sanborn now. That's very important. And then also the abutting vicinity. I have some street shots that you'll see the setbacks. We were very careful in placing the structures that are in the convent site now with a setback that is sensitive to the environment. This is looking from above, the overhead. And here, this is the area as it looks today from above. You see the concentration of fabric that is being built in this area. Obviously, the interstate had a detriment to it, but the neighborhood is strong and coming back in a very positive, sensitive way to preservation. So it's just north of the interstate and south of Columbus Drive, or on Columbus Drive and 20th. This is looking from Columbus Drive back into the site. Natural Resources has reviewed this site, and the site plan that's presented is able to move forward as presented. This is the abutting house to the east and a series of the houses to the east. There is some separation from the sidewalk with a retaining wall. This does have a very elaborate welcome wall coming up the front steps to the piers and the front porch. That's very characteristic to the area. This is looking down the street. This is down Columbus Drive, looking to the east. The series of houses that I just showed were here, and did an expansion of that. And then you see the setbacks as it frames the street. There is some parallel parking associated with Columbus Drive now. And this is, subject site is over here. This is 20th Street, Columbus Drive. Looking to the west, this was the convent site that was bare in the early 1920s, and you see the roof lines and the historic nature, and you see some multi-family structures. So there's a series of 1- and 2-story structures that line this block. This was the site that we just looked at. This is to the south of the subject site with this request. This is that corner structure. You see how it kind of fits in with that vernacular there. And then lastly, this is just a shot. Subject site is here, Columbus Drive. You see the granite curb in here, the width of the sidewalk, some of the challenges that it has, but retaining walls, most of the houses have, some don't. The vehicular access was always a challenge. They've incorporated parking on site, and then the rest of the neighborhood kind of uses the parallel parking. That concludes the photo presentation, and I'll have the agent address the board.
All right. Start with 2001 East Columbus Drive. Site plan is challenging as well. Frontage been 40.
Excuse me, Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. I know we just heard from you, but can you please state your name on the record again,
Sorry.
please?
Thomas
Okay.
Miller, builder, 2001 East Columbus Drive.
I am Manuel Alvarin.
Site plan, once again, it's another challenging lot. The frontage is only 42, side 63, 2-story frame lot. I mentioned campus tree will be removed. This setback is 6 foot to the porch. And we came up with those setbacks by using addresses 1916 East Columbus, 1915 East Columbus, 1913, and the structure that's next door to the east, 2003 East Columbus Drive. But we're willing to modify the setback. We will retain, keep the integrity of the retaining wall that's present along Columbus Drive. Parking requirement of parking is located in the rear of the residence. Granite curbing will be depressed as well. Skirt elevation, smooth stucco with the brick veneer, gel windows, texture for that window elevation. Okay, so we have another opaque window there. Gel and textured window, pure foundation. Here, porch here. What material we're using? Azek
decking.
decking. Do we add anything right here? Nope. Columns were altered on this one as well, correct? You might want to explain that.
Yeah, the column for this house is similar to the neighborhood, and we took this house as a reference. The pier is a concrete brick, and the welcome walls in the stair. We respect also the height of the finished floor. We measure the neighborhood height of the finished floor height of the next door houses. We have here a wall section showing how the column is gonna be built. We have on this house raster tails in the porch and also in the roof for the residence. And on this sheet, we show the stereo door, the roof, also the color palette here. We chose a white for the trim. That's a light blue for the residence. Here the soffit and the lap siding is going to be Jeff Hardy.
5-inch, right?
Those are windows for the bathroom, so we're using this window as a sample. It's going to be textured strip glass window. It's going to be clear. It's going to be a white. Do you have anything?
Oh, address this inside with the lights.
Okay, one of the comments from the members, it was reconfigure the front facade because before we have a 3-foot windows and the door, and it looked more condensed. Now we shrink the windows to 2 foot, and we made more spaces between the window and the door to place the light. That's our recommendation for this design. I think that we finished.
Okay, Mr. Vila?
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. Staff's finding this application is consistent with the Ybor City Design Guidelines. As with the prior project, there were some modifications made from the plans that we reviewed to what we've seen this morning. That's the process that we go through, and I think it's very successful coming forward. To start with elevation from grade and setback, the elevation from grade is consistent with the abutting fabric that's in the area. This will need a design exception, so there is an established pattern of setbacks. YC2 states that the zoning is 10 foot from the property line. They're asking to reduce the 10 foot to be in line with the averaging, so there is a tool through the zoning department. It's a design exception that they have to enter into. There's an application that needs to be filled out, and then it would be routed to preservation for final sign-off. So if that's the pleasure of the board, if this is to receive final, that it still has to go through the design exception 1 process. The welcome walls that are shown on the front elevation, additional information is required for that. He's drawing inspiration from the project or the structure to the east, but additional details are required. The windows with the stippled glass, what we are requesting is that the glass is translucent. It's still a clear glass, but with the stippling, it's not transparent. So that would be the proper installation for here. As he goes through his wall section, this one has a different articulation than the prior one. This has a more generous overhang, so he does have exposed rafters, and whatever the rafter tails, the dimensions of the rafter tails, and then the materials between the rafter tails need to be discussed. The last item that I have is the incorporation of the retaining wall. There was no drawings to illustrate exactly what that is, the height of the retaining wall, if it has a cap, if it has any pilasters engaged. So additional discussion on the retaining wall. That concludes my portion, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vila. Anyone here from the public wishing to comment on the case, please identify yourself. Seeing none, we can ask questions of the applicant, starting on my left with Ms. Welch.
Excuse me. One of the questions I have is on your pillars in the front. What are those made of? What are you putting those, what are those?
Okay, the pillar is going to be seen. It is concrete block with brick veneer.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Zoom in on that north elevation a little bit. I want to talk about sort of how the foundation, the stem wall just kind of transitions around from the entry porch and around to the sides, because it looks like you have several different materials going on there, and I just kind of, as we kind of turn the corner. Yeah, good.
That's a porch.
Right, and so now underneath, because I believe like on the south elevation, we like from the previous project, you have the brick piers, right, or the brick like application to make them look like piers, and you have the smooth stucco finish in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we go to the north elevation, like as we're looking at the north elevation, like the left side of the house, it almost looks like it's lap siding or something there from it, but what is that exactly? As we kind of.
Those are steps.
Oh, those are
Steps.
steps as
Those are
well.
steps.
Oh,
Yeah,
part of the
those are
porch.
steps for
Oh,
the
okay,
porch.
that makes sense. All right, got
the-
it.
There's a
That's
deck
confusing.
For this
Deck there.
porch.
For porch on both sides, okay. And then, as we approach the porch on the right side there as well, what's happening underneath the porch there?
It's
Is
open.
it go through, it's open? Is that,
Mhm.
okay.
It's a good porch and open
Mhm.
with post.
Okay, got it. And so then, you showed a soffit, the James Hardy soffit, but you have exposed rafter tails. Could you talk about sort of the rafter tails, like the material in between them? and
Yes,
how
but-
all that works?
Okay, so it's going to be exposed rafter tail, but the soffit is going to be below the deck, the roof deck. The soffit material is going to be below the roof deck and with the rafter tail
Oh, okay, so in between.
in between.
Okay, got it. Is there anything else? Can we just go quickly back to the site plan? I just want to take a quick look at it again. I'm not sure I have a question. I just wanted to. Okay. And then the house itself is framed though, right? Not masonry?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, those are the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Just a clarification, because you showed us on the, I guess it's the west elevation, there's two smaller windows that are into the bathroom, and you said that they're gonna be, you showed us a sample, but on the drawing, you're showing them with divided lights. The sample you showed, the window.
Yes, I need to find the one with the dividing light.
Okay, but that's your intention?
Yeah, with the dividing light.
Okay, that was the only question I had, thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Can you go back to the north elevation?
Yes.
Zoom in on the north. So there's a couple things here. One is I still feel that front porch feels really tight. But I think it has to do with a couple of things. One is the top window proportion. It feels like it sits right on that roof. I don't know if it needs to be reduced. You should look at that. And then, I don't know, did you find a precedent for the shingled, the shingle face on the porch roof? Anywhere? Have you seen that in the area? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the shingle.
Right. I
the
mean, we've
shingle
looked at
siding,
those
yeah.
in other projects, and I don't see it. I'm just asking if you pulled that from somewhere that you saw it and.
I saw it in the barrio, but I
Okay.
don't have a sample here.
Okay. I think those two things make that elevation still feel like there's a lot going on and tight and all that. I will look at that. And then can you go to the south elevation? Can you show the plans again?
Yes.
For this? So I question, on the south elevation, on the top floor, you have 2 windows off the bedroom. And then on the first floor, you have 1 window that's centering those 2 windows. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that
That's the second floor, 2 windows, and that's the window at the first floor. Because the second floor is just over here.
Right, I know. But what is that room? That's a master bedroom?
Yes.
Go back to the south elevation. Okay. It just feels to me like they should align or have 2 windows on the bottom too. I don't know, just to make it feel, it's just a little bit,
It's the
the
driveway.
proportions of it
It's the driveway, so.
Right.
yeah.
I know. And then the last question, just really quick, on those decks, are you planning at some point adding rails to those? Or just
We
open
have-
like that?
We have a 6x6 here.
What about the
Oh,
decks?
for the porch, no,
No?
because it's lower than 30 inches.
Oh, that's fine. I'm just asking if you're planning at some
No, no.
point, you think you might want to add them. I just wanted to see if something that we needed to look at, but that's fine. That's it.
Let's start off with the other elevation first, and then we're gonna come back to this one,
Which one?
the other one.
This one?
Yep. Okay, so I think my concerns on this, on the west elevation, that door is a little bit too close to the trim, so I think that needs to shift off. I mean, we've been talking about having 2-foot separation so you get your trim details in there. I think you have the room in there to shift that. Same with the 2 front windows up by the front of the, by the front porch. So I think those need to shift back.
Yeah, we
little
have, we have the stair there, and the clearance at the point, that's the head clearance for the stair. In the floor plan,
Okay? I mean, you're not
you
gonna
see
be
the
able
floor
to,
plan, this is the door, and we have the stair for the second floor there.
yeah, you're not gonna be able to trim out that door.
No.
There's a problem.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, go back to the plan. I wanna look at those front 2 windows. So up here, yeah, you have room to move that. I mean, 1 window would be in the stairwell, the other would be up in the second floor bedroom. Okay. So, yeah, and I know with the stairs, so that may have to shift internally to be able to make that work, but you're not gonna have room with that door there. I don't know if it's something, you can't put it on the other wall there, so, yeah, it's just too close, you're not gonna be able to trim out that door. So let's go back to the east elevation, there's 3 elevations on one sheet, yeah. So I guess, I like what you're doing here with the 3/1 with the windows. I think that's good for that architecture style. The roof slopes work, the exposed wood, on the beams on the front elevation, tie in with the porch detailing there. I do agree with Mr. Perez's comment on the hardboard shingle. I think that's such a small roof area that you should probably stay with just the siding there instead of introducing another element. So on the north elevation, that porch is really small, and I get what you're doing. It's kind of a 2-story shotgun frame house. But when you start at that front, the north elevation with the west elevation, you have a whole different range of windows going on. The front two windows on the west elevation, one looks like it's 3 foot wide, the one on the bottom is 2 foot. I'd like to see if you can kind of simplify that language a little bit.
Yeah.
You see like the one on the west elevation, the one up the top is like 3 foot wide, the one on the bottom is 2
Yeah,
foot
but-
wide, so that proportion, they need to kind of work together, and I think that same kind of aesthetic that Mr. Perez was talking about on the south elevation, you know, I don't know if you can get that 2-story, that one is okay, I think, for me. But then when you start looking at that on the west elevation, you start to lose some of that proportion in that family of windows by introducing another element. And to use that same language on the north elevation, you know, maybe that top window goes down to the skinny one that you're using on the front there, because you've got those smaller 2 foot windows that you're trying to fit within the columns, which we like. I think that's an appropriate use there. But there's a lot going on in that little area. So I think if you carry that same element up to the second floor, maybe that helps the proportion there a little bit. But I see what you're doing with the double windows, so I think just some slight modifications like that, I think would be fine there. No gutters on this, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And everything, you showed us a soffit detail, but really everything's gonna be exposed rougher tails. You clarified to him, it's not a V-board, but you're gonna have a soffit board above, so it'll be
Above
a
that,
finished surface, okay? We talked about the doors and the windows. You know, I think your grade elevations here, when we jump to the site plan, I think you're using, you know, setting your elevation of the house fine. I like how you're building off that rhythm with the other houses down on Columbus, so I'm okay with your design exception that you're gonna have to request here to get that in line with the adjacent buildings, and I think that is an appropriate use. I would like you to work with staff on the, you know, that front porch, and I think that's a nice detail. It ties it in with the rest of the houses. Can you talk about how you wanna construct that? Is that gonna be like just a concrete wall or stucco, or what are you thinking for that? Because got the curved approach.
The walls, the retaining walls?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be concrete.
With a cap.
With a cap.
Concrete, painted, stucco.
Yeah, with a stucco, and
Stucco.
we're gonna put a cap.
Okay. And that goes all the way back from the street edge where because the other houses on that street have like, they seem to be a little bit higher. They have more of a retaining wall. I don't think you need one on your site, but are you gonna build that up so you have a little
Yeah,
knee wall there?
We stop it here because this sidewalk is gonna be new, so we stop it on the sidewalk.
Okay.
I'm going to be stopped at the edge of the other house, because the other house has a retention wall
So
too.
you're gonna match the adjacent?
Try to match it.
It might be nice to have like a little, maybe that retaining wall in that corner, where you turn it maybe a couple feet, like 2 feet, to kind of wrap that
Okay.
corner instead of
Okay.
just stopping it dead. That'll create a nice little street edge for you.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. You have a few moments if there's anything that you'd like to summarize our discussion or about anything.
You have something? No, thank you
Okay.
for it.
Thank you.
Okay. We're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing, and we can discuss the case amongst ourselves. Mr. Perez.
Just I like your comment about going back to reviewing all the windows, especially that front porch. I think it needs a little bit of work, but looks good.
I'd just like to say that these are very exciting projects, and compliments to you and your builder and the architect, and particularly to staff, because we've been able to kind of, from the drawings that we were provided, we've seen the development, and we so appreciate, I so appreciate the fact that these meet the guidelines and go beyond, really. This really seems like both are going to be really quality projects that are really going to enhance the neighborhood, and can't always say that, so just thank you. It's not a word we use because it's not in the guidelines, but they're both really charming. And the neighborhood's charming, so it's appropriate. But that said, the only comments I have to add is I agree about the front porch and the window proportion. I think there's an easy solution, and you can work with staff. I think either you group the door with the 2 windows, and there's just a you know, the siding.
Sideline.
So it's a grouping of three things, or another option might be not to divide those skinny windows with the third lights on top and just do one over one, which then changes the proportion. But there's an easy solution there. And then the only other comment I have is we didn't see any detail, and it was hard to tell from the drawings, about how the roof vents are framed. They don't need to be as elaborate as a window, but there is a historic precedent in the neighborhood for how that should be expressed.
Yeah, I echo similar sentiments. I think it'll be an exciting project. Simplify the windows on the west elevation and work with staff on making that front porch a little less cramped, and it will be a great project.
I agree with everything so far that everyone else has expressed. I also like your recommendation about taking that wall around the corner. That, I think that'll really look nice and add some touch.
Well, you know, as architects, we like blowing up the budget, things like that, you know.
I don't know.
No, I really like this project. I think it's very charming. There's two very tight sites, and we're starting to see a lot more cases come before us that are on very tight sites. So I think that makes it more important that the detailing is right and the proportions are right. Instead of having a carte blanche site, this one, you have to work at it, you know. So, and I think you've been working with staff, and staff is doing an excellent job of kind of corralling you and pointing you in the right direction. So I think those 5 points to kind of work on, adjust. I think that door is going to be a little tricky for you there.
Yeah.
But you do need to get that separated from that corner. I mean, you just can't build it that way. But very nice project, and I think it'll be a great addition to that neighborhood. Thank you.
When someone makes a motion, please don't forget, as staff suggested, that there needs to be a design exception as a part of condition if the board so chooses to approve a motion for the certificate of appropriateness.
I'll go ahead and, a final approval with conditions. So move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in BLC 22-35 for the property located at 2001 East Columbus Drive, with the following conditions: that the applicant works with staff to sort of declutter the front porch and reconsider the window proportions at the front porch, and potentially the gable end, and consider lap siding instead of the shingles. That the applicant work with staff as well to redo the proportions of the windows on the west elevation and simplify the different types of windows that are being used. That the applicant turns the retaining wall at the edge, at the street edge, along at the intersection. Let's see, is there anything else that I may be missing in terms of conditions?
Relocate that door. I don't know if that's in your decluttering.
Yeah, no, sure, right.
Move that door off that wall.
And that the applicant work with staff to move the door off of the porch end on the west elevation. Is correct. Yes.
I think we need construction section through the retaining wall too, to call out the materials.
And then, provide staff with a section through the retaining wall to finalize the finishes on that retaining wall.
And the roof vent.
Oh,
frame.
and then, provide the roof vent details, work with the roof vent framing details for staff as well. And then, how do I word design
The
exception?
applicant
The staff, the applicant needs to obtain approval for design exception.
Okay, and that the applicant,
As a condition of your certificate of
For
appropriateness.
front yard setbacks.
okay, and that the applicant needs to obtain a design exception for the front yard setbacks as part of the, final approval. Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah, that's just a lot of wording. Because based upon the finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Ybor City design guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons: that it conforms with the design criteria for the new construction and additions for height and width, facade width, setback, spacing, alignment, similarity of details and forms, and building materials.
There have been a number of conditions put on this proposed approval with conditions. Is the applicant okay with these conditions for approval?
Yes.
Okay, hearing yes.
Second?
Okay. All in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Commissioners, moving forward to our last case this morning, which is BLC 22-59, for the address of 1015 Lily White Court. There were some structures there that have been removed. They're in the process of demoing the site at this time. They were constructed in 1969, and they are non-contributing structures. The request is to receive final approval on January 25th of 2022. Presentation was received by this board, and they received preliminary approval. The conditions from preliminary approval are attached to your staff report on page 3. Just to give you some history, on October 2021, there was a PD attached to this site, which allowed them to put the massing, the height, the scale of the buildings in place, and that was approved by City Council. So as you move forward, the focus on the presentation this morning will be on the preliminary approval conditions from January 25th, and then also staff has a list of items that need to be addressed as part of the final approval as well, and they're on page 4 of your staff report. Just to briefly go through the site and kind of get you reacclimated. On the monitor right now is the Sanborn map showing the approximate location of the subject site, showing the density, what was there. Just to rehash on the Sanborn map, yellow indicates frame structures, red is brick structures, and blue is concrete block. So you see the housing stock that was there. You see the row houses that were in place to help with the employee situation that was there, mainly with the cigar factories that were great employers of the environment. Moving to the overhead, this is showing the fabric. These were the structures that were built in 1969. We're just focusing on the green area today. The red line indicates the southern boundary of the local district. This is just a wider shot of that, showing the concentrated site. 7th Avenue is to the north, you have Nebraska to the west, and you have Adamo to the south as your boundaries. This is looking at the current vicinity map that we have. We're focusing in this area here. Once again, you see the boundaries of the local district of Ybor City. These were the non-contributing structures that were removed. You have 7th Avenue to the north, Nebraska, and Adamo as reference points. And just a couple shots to conclude of the housing stock that was there, and it's in the process of being removed right now. At this time, the agent can address the board and continue the presentation from the preliminary approval as they are seeking a final this morning.
That's one question for staff before we start their presentation. You list the zoning as YC2, but as part of the PD process, shouldn't the zoning be YC9/PD?
That is an accurate statement. That was left over from the prior.
Thank you.
Can you repeat
I'll
what
say
the correct?
good morning, but how do I get from one? Oh, there it is. Oh, nobody told me that. This is his presentation. We have,
PowerPoint?
yeah, no, it's not a PowerPoint. Dennis is messing me up here.
What are you showing?
We had two files that were open. He,
Should be. Yeah, it's on PC.
there it is. Well, that looks like his, sorry.
Alt tab.
I have a way with machines. You got one to bring in. You could bring in You see the B, is that it? Yeah, I believe that's it.
Okay, go ahead. I'll let you take it from there.
That's it? No, not at all. Good morning. I might be apologizing a lot, starting with apology on the technical difficulties. It's operator error, I'm sure. Stephanie Gaines with Kurtz Gaines Hall Jones Architects. We're the architects on this phase 1 of the Tampa Gas Works project we called Parcel 1, W1. With me, I have Alan Ward with Sasaki International, who's the overall Gasworks land planners and the landscape architects for this particular parcel, and John Cleary, who is the representative from the developer, Kettler Development. And the guy I couldn't do much without, Michael Pilara. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this special hearing, considering all that's going on right now. And the size of this project, takes quite a while to get through. We know that you've been looking at a lot of really interesting projects come through Ybor recently. And we just want to say that we're really proud to be working on this with the group, and feel that it is distinctly significant because of the local history, the specific history related to the site. That's the first thing. And, this photograph someone from the team found, I've been looking at Ybor City photographs for 40 years, and I've never seen this one. Here's the Florida Brewery. I can zoom in if you need me to, but this is 12th Avenue, what was 12th Avenue, and is now actually 11th, which is here, was combined with 12th. Both of them were taken out and replaced with the expansive Nick Nucio Parkway. And 5th Avenue here, 5th Avenue and 4th Avenue were also removed. Sorry, this is 6th and 5th. And this is the site. So I was really excited to find this and had to share that. This was the hub, this area of Ybor was the hub of the Afro-Cuban immigrant settlement. When the Cubans came to, from what I was reading, when the Cubans came to Ybor, they came together and were introduced to segregation when they got to the States. So they had their own community, they had their own social club, the Martí Marceo, which in the 1960s, urban renewal completely obliterated this area. All the structures, all the homes, all the families, everybody was relocated, and including the social club was torn down, and it's the only of the special social clubs that we have in Ybor that was never rebuilt. Some burned during fires and that kind of thing, but it has never been rebuilt. They operate out of a little building on 7th Avenue, as you know, I'm sure. But anyway, that's just really tragic history that's related to this, so we're really glad to bring it back to life. Second is, let me see. Second is the unique location of a property being at the southern end of the historic district. This is what we're looking at, W1 right now. And the location to us creates an opportunity and really a responsibility to provide a bridge of sorts between historic architecture and modern architecture, which is ongoing in Channelside, downtown, and all the surrounding areas. And we think we've tried really hard to put that responsibility on this project and blend historic and new architecture on those. Sorry, I'm just getting used to this. Okay, just to recap real quickly, where we've been, Ron mentioned the processes. This is the PD plan that was approved, I believe, in November through City Council. You reviewed it in October and recommended approval. What you reviewed, the blue is the PD, is the entire PD that was approved by City Council. What you reviewed is, this is the Historic District southern boundary. You reviewed what was inside of this, which is W1 and also a portion of W2. We are here now for our preliminary and now final review of just the W1 parcel. So it's not the full PD that you reviewed. It leaves out the northern portion of this, which will be another project which will come before you. Okay? The result of the process we've been through so far is this site plan. Michael, we're gonna use this site plan, give you each one because it has sections and renderings keyed in, and we just thought it would be nice for you to have those in front of you when we get to those items. So in establishing the design criteria for the PD zoning, you know, we worked with items such as orientation and placement, massing, setbacks, those sort of things, alignment and massing. Yeah, I said that. And that was what was incorporated into this phase. We used a few significant factory complexes in Ybor to model after. And we, in striving to be that transition, that bridge, we kept the general idea is to keep the northern, W1, excuse me again, W1 is here from the white line to the right. This is a Nick Nucio viewpoint and should be labeled on your site plans there. When we added the significantly put back the grid of 5th and 6th Avenues here, 4th and 5th. I'm keep confusing that, and kept the massing a little bit differently. The north building has massing that's broken down more, a very simple, modeled after cigar factory buildings, and the south is taller and has more going on and a little bit more modern interpretation. The north building is 3 and 4 stories, and the south is 4 and 5 stories. And this creates this gradual curve that we would expect to happen, with this being the historic boundary. So the W2 will come in with 5 and 6 stories, and then we don't know what goes on beyond that. Oops, I went backward. So sorry. It's just too gentle for me. So now that we've dealt with those original criteria, now we're to items such as details, forms, building materials, and color palettes. And so this is just a collage of some of the collective things we've picked up from Ybor. You know, things like the corner arcade at the corner of the El Pasaje building, the El Pasaje building, the 2 bridges that are currently, they're new, you know, they're not historic, but they have been approved through the board. Tower elements on the cigar factories, storefronts, rusticated bases, all of these things are pointing to where we have indicated those, but where we have utilized those elements. We've got cantilevered balconies as well as the slender pole-supported, column-supported balconies. This technique of using a very simple brick detail to pair 2 floors of windows, we've incorporated into the south building. Metal roof and the plaster or stone base, that's pretty typical, along with a repeating pattern of windows. When we were here before, you asked for more 3D, and here's another apology, but we have been working on those since we met with you in January. But everybody's very busy, and so there are some things that, didn't get completed. So we're going to go through them. We wanted to show you anyway, and it's just details that we'll talk through. So this is the view from Nick Nucio, kind of looking southwest. The north building here and the south building here. So you can see that this is a shorter, simple form, shorter building. And we actually stepped down to the south to 3 stories here to accentuate the 5-story corner of the south building, which is our main entry. The lobby and all the amenities are in this location, where the north building is strictly residential. And we've got a, gee whiz, I'm so sorry. We've got a, grade change I mentioned before of 10 feet from the northwest corner to the southeast corner. And we have used a retaining wall to help hold that land in, but also to provide this street, all the buildings in Ybor, we tend to want to bring them to the street edge and express that. Here we have a wide city park that we can't do anything with, that belongs to the city. And we've taken the building and gotten as close to the setback as possible with stepping the building to come closer and closer to it. But we've used this strong line of the retaining wall, the low 24-inch retaining wall, to really express the geometry of the site. So it follows the curvature of the site. And here you can also start to notice some of the differences. In the detailing, we're using a more pronounced cornice on the north building and simplified, less pronounced on the south. We talked about the height. We have a detail of pairing windows, which we'll get to in a little bit. And here where we have singular, on the north building, we have mostly singular balconies. We have joined balconies, much like you would see on 7th Avenue on the south building. Just closer up, getting ready to look down 5th Avenue. Here's that main entry elevation section, and stairs going up to the plaza that's outdoors here. We have a lot of outdoor functions happening along the south building, which don't occur on the north building. A little patio here and there. There's a grand oak tree here that we're saving, and one inside the courtyard. This is 2 renderings that didn't get finished. This is the view of Scott Street. Oh, I went backward. There we go. This is the view of Scott Street, which is a residential and school community. Looking back down 5th Avenue, and you can see the bridge beyond. I didn't mention that we treated the bridge differently from the rest of the buildings. We didn't see it as appropriate to make it heavy and made out of masonry like the buildings are. We felt that using the metals and keeping it open air was the way to accentuate the architecture, or let the building stand out and this more disappear. We have individual balconies again and walkout units along the street here. This view is further south on Scott Street. So we were just looking at this portion of the building. And this is the southern building, where you can see it entirely. And here's where we have grouped balconies, where here we have individual balconies. Here we've got grouped balconies together. We're still not seeing that detail in the brick, but we'll get to it. The other thing to point out is that the north building is about 70% brick facade, whereas the south building has a lot less brick, still has significant amount, around 30–40%. Another way that we're having the buildings relate to one another but be subtly different. And this section of the building is the parking garage. And so the building, the south building wraps around the parking garage on two sides, leaving the narrowest ends of the parking exposed north and south. And one of the things that you guys ask us to do is look at differentiating the plane, having the parking garage maybe push in a little bit. And we spent a lot of time looking at that. We were not successful because we have, we've dedicated, in the very beginning, dedicated almost an acre of land to rebuilding the streets and bringing back the grid. And we've reduced down to 1.2 parking spaces per unit. We've got even, we've got a high percentage of commuter compact spaces, and we've got even alternate vehicle spaces for motorcycles and scooters. And then we can't reduce it any further. And we looked at taking just 2 feet out of the north and the south, and that took away 40 vehicles, which was 10%. So we just couldn't do it. And we felt like we could solve the problem in other ways, let it express itself as a warehouse building, different from the residential uses on the side, separate it with a darker brick stair tower, and provide metal frames, aluminum frames that are covered in a fabric that can be an opportunity for historic art, which is our proposal. And it's not shown on this rendering, but we will show you more of that. Now, I have the two-dimensional elevations, and I'm happy to run through them, but maybe I can use those for answering any questions, and, if you're okay with that, since we've seen the 3D. We did bring boards for some of those bigger pieces so that you can take that down and put up the south building, I think. I'm not going to go through them, so just put up the south building. Does it show the image on the garage? Okay, so we've just, on that, I can't see it, but we've thrown some suggested images, and, that one you're looking at might be the faces of Marti and Marceo. We'd love to be able to somehow document their story associated with the property, maybe do a memorial, but all of those things take a long time, and they require input from the community. So we don't have the exact information on that here, but that's our intention. The sections, very quickly, through the, you've got those keyed in on your plan there too. The north building on the left and the south building on the right with the bridge in between. This is a section where the north building is 4 stories, south is 5, and the bridge connects at level 3. This is another section through both buildings where, toward the Negnucio end, which is a 3-story section, and a 5-story section. This is the entry, walking into a 2-story space, and all of the amenities. And this is cut through the opposite direction of the south building, showing the 4-story drop in the center of the south building with a small rooftop terrace. The units below, the retail is here, and the amenities looking out over the pool. This is the open courtyard, pool courtyard, and then units facing that. And flanking both sides of the parking garage here in the middle. Okay, Michael, do you have the detail sheets for these? So we put together a couple of collaged sheets here to try to give you more detail you requested from last time. There are two building sections here, wall sections here. For the north building, they're both in the 4-story section. And we've got details here that are keyed in. So starting at the cornice, we've got, you want to show, that's upside down, but we've got we're nicknaming it foam. We're calling it foam. It's a big cornice at the top of that building. We were unable to get it skinned for this presentation, so you just see the foam. But that sits above the brick walls. There's another foam piece here about 3 feet down, 2.5 feet down. This is a typical canopy detail, which is keyed in here. Sometimes the canopies on the building, we have other pieces of foam that represent the smaller pieces, trim that are shown on the details. I don't think we need to, yeah, if they want to see them, we can. So back to the canopy. Some of this canopy at this top floor cantilevers out with no support, but we have many that have rod supports, so that's why that's dashed in. Here's a typical balcony railing detail section and partial elevation. The base of the north building, the building is mostly covered in brick, and at the base, we're building out the base with 4-inch block and putting stucco and a trim piece between to separate those into 24-inch bands with another foam piece trim on the top. Let me see what I didn't cover. These are sections, you've seen that. That's the trim on the top, and this is the detail on the base of the building. For the windows in brick, we've shown the windows when we've got a sample of the windows we're using. We've got vinyl windows. They have a fin, which is intended to mount to the surface of a frame wall. But to accentuate the placement of those and increase the depth, we've reduced the bucks that are used to install the windows back so we can gain about a 5-inch setback on the brick areas. That's true for the sill and for the head. And on the, we've done the same thing on the stucco, where stucco occurs, but with that, we're only able to achieve just over 2 inches of a setback, but we feel that's a lot better than what you would normally get in wood construction. I think I covered everything. This next detail is of the south building, a 5-story section on the left and a 4-story on the right. And the cornice detail there is composed of just 2 separate pieces, those pieces that Michael held up, with brick in between. So it's a much simpler looking cornice. This is a detail through the balconies, which are supported on steel columns. The railing details are the same. We're just using that one detail throughout. We'll have divider panels between the balconies. I mean, yeah, to create privacy between units, and that will be done out of a perforated metal that we'll show you in a minute. This is the base. Now, on the base of this building, we are using oversized brick. They're actually brick. They're 8 by 16 and they're 4 inches deep. And we're using those on the base of the building up to the first floor, or for the first floor, and then going back to a common size brick above that. This is just a way we feel to play with the scale of the taller building and to differentiate between the two, and not just in detail, but in historic versus a little bit more modern interpretation. Although you see this oversized brick, maybe it's not brick, but other components used in Ybor as well. And then we've got a very subtle detail between the fifth and fourth level and the third and second level of the windows on the south building only, which is just a recessed, here's the detail, sorry. We use a 3-inch, bed brick to create a recess and then fill with, in the center with the common depth of the brick here. And that just creates a couple of shadow lines that we think will be nice on the building. Same details, windows and in the brick and windows in stucco. And this is how we're achieving the rusticated base. We're again using that 3-inch bed brick to create these stripes, if you will, the shadow lines at 24 inches apart on the base. Some details of the roofs that we're providing at the minor entries. Just a sloped hip roof. We're using a minimum depth standing seam roof. We have data on that for you. I know that you like 1.5 or 2 inches. That's what we're planning on using. Metal brackets. All the finishes will be covered in metal. And we just shown a couple of details here, a couple of instances for those smaller roofs in Ybor. This is information on the bridge, a partial elevation, and then a section through the different components. Again, we're using the, I don't know why I can't come up with a name there, but the minimum profile standing seam black roof, black steel post top and bottom. These posts maintain that slender look of Ybor, but even though they're 12 inches at the base and 8 inches, but because of the proportion of where that bridge is located to clear traffic, it still gets that, yeah, okay, I didn't know you had that. And then the railing, we're doing the same design railing, but we are proposing a perforated metal fill instead of the railing, picket railings, just to create a little bit more solid feel up there, and a smaller opening in the, something more solid, smaller openings between the rails, between the components. And that is the material we'll use in other places on the project. The structure will be exposed, I-beam carrying the flooring, which, sorry. Okay. Yeah, it's the metal pan metal pan concrete there that will just be finished. We're not adding any materials to that. And then we've just got, where we have lights, we've got just a shallow black can, nothing ornamental in that area. This is just a quick little sketch of where that bridge connects to the north building and that north entry. To parking, this is the detail that we had shown you this detail before. We had talked about using perforated metal here, but then we're really inspired to do the to make more use of this product or this location and create some artwork here. So we just threw this on here. Sorry to get, these are a couple of samples of things other people have done. And so these panels will sit out from the facade of the garage about 4 inches. And with this photo, we're just showing that there are simply utilitarian buildings in Ybor that was part of its history that, are different and express themselves as such. And it seems appropriate to, while not have it be ugly, let it express itself differently than the rest of the building. Here's just a detail through the entry, a couple of sketches. This is the corner of Nick Nucio and Fifth, where our main entry is and all our amenities. We're treating it kind of as a corner colonnade, similar to, I'm glad this isn't a gas pedal, I'll tell you, I'd be in bad shape. Similar to that El Pasaje corner we used for inspiration. With the storefront setback for these areas, this is just a section through the narrowest part of the arcade. And we just would like to have a focal, maybe address or name of the project at the end of that. There's a canopy that wraps around the corner of the building here, and it happens on the south as well. There is a big grade change, so we've got a railing at parts of this colonnade. And this is a page that begins to show our thoughts on lighting and signage. You know, there'll have to be a large branding effort, you know, for the company. And, wow, I can't believe that I've talked for 30 minutes. We have to go through that exercise before we can bring you the full detailed signage package. We'd love to work with staff on these things and wanted to just show you what we are using for inspiration. Some of the corner signage that you see, some of the painted signage on the buildings, blade sign, and signage over entries.
Would you like to request additional time for your presentation?
Oh, do I? Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Good.
Yes, we would like additional time.
I don't know if we set a certain amount of time or just,
With the motion, in your motion to grant additional time, you just modify, explain whatever, however long you want.
I know.
How much more time do you believe you need?
We have a whole landscaping site package, so, I mean, I'd ask for 30 more minutes.
Okay. Motion to grant the applicant 30 more minutes of presentation time?
Last, I think, in my presentation, I'm sorry, so sorry.
okay, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Was there a second?
I did.
Opposed?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. You have an additional 30 minutes.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying not to use much of it.
Yeah.
This is just a material board. Do you have that one in large? That shows all the different components that we've talked about. The colors, we've got brick samples. You got the brick samples. Brick samples, paint colors, windows. We've got what we've wound up using or specifying is this ply gem window. This one is full size. It's shown in bronze, but we have it in black, and honestly looks very much like what was the other brand? PGT? Yeah, very much. This is a black sample of the trim, brick mold trim. Sorry. What else we have? And you can pass that around too. That's some paint and glass samples. You know, we would like to use clear glass. We know that's important. We do have to use some tint to get the energy, to meet the energy code. And did you show the bricks? He did. Okay. Okay, I'll just leave it on. Okay, I'm sorry, this has been a kind of a patchy, but I want to introduce Alan now to talk about the landscape hardscape. Try to give him enough time.
Okay, good morning.
I'm going to move it for you. Go ahead. There you go.
So I'll summarize how the landscape design complements this historic building within the district, how it also starts to make a transition to the rest of the Gasworks district, because we've been working on the bigger picture, as Stephanie mentioned, And of course, the landscape also has to connect to the regional climate and to the history of the site. No,
Oh, so glad, not just me. Hit it back, and then you just roll.
roll down,
Yeah,
down, there we go, okay.
yeah, it goes really fast.
Okay. That's better,
Oh,
that's better.
there we go.
Okay, so the site, there are two distinct sides, east and west. Scott Street on the west is at kind of a much smaller scale than Nuccio Parkway on the east with a broad setback with the city park. We also have the design of these two avenues, Fourth Avenue and Fifth Avenue. And there also are three courtyards on the site. And you see the two courtyards here on the east are linked. There's kind of an urban design strategy here with a visual axis drawn north-south, linking those two courtyards. The crosswalk at Fifth Avenue is along that visual axis. And residents will go from the north building to the south building along that line to use the pool and other amenities in the south building. So that's kind of a powerful landscape idea that links the two with these spaces that kind of expand and contract as you move through them. The landscape is inspired and affected by what we learned with some research into the historic character of Ybor City. And what we have found, and we're working with Ricky Pederica, a local landscape architect, on this project, and what we've found as a team, there are very few streets in Ybor City that historically were lined with a consistent pattern of street tree planting. It's a more of a dispersed pattern, seizing the opportunities to plant along streets where possible. So there isn't these kind of bigger gestures of continuous street tree planting. So just as the building has started to break down along the street facades, almost look like separate buildings, likewise, the landscape along the streets, we've varied the planting so the scale of the street starts to break down, almost appear like smaller buildings along 4th, 5th, Nuccio, and Scott Street. We also, Ricky has found plant lists from the 1920s and 30s that were used by the nursery industry in Ybor City. So we're utilizing those same plant materials, particularly if they were native species. And here's a couple interesting photographs here on the upper left and lower right. You see these planted spaces surrounded by low walls. And as Stephanie showed you along Nuccio Parkway, we have a similar condition. So, and within those then planted spaces were live oak, cycads, as well as palm planting. So there were historically similar sorts of spaces in Ybor City that were rather abundantly planted and surrounded by these walls. We're also employing the brick crosswalks, as you see in the lower left here, for the crosswalks around the site. And there are a couple opportunities where we can use the hexagonal paving in publicly accessible areas right off of the sidewalk zone. We aren't using the Washingtonia palms, we're using sable palms. They were favored in the past. The scale of the sable palm seems more appropriate. The furnishings that we have selected or are in the process of selecting are inspired by what we see in Ybor City. So the scale, color, the patterns you see here in the bench here, for example, we're using something quite similar, as well as the wall and the fencing in a little more simplified version, but still inspired by what we saw in Ybor City. And the lighting is a particularly challenging topic, and I'll show some examples of where we're headed with that, but we have been inspired by the globe lights in the district, but you still have to meet contemporary lighting standards and criteria. So we're getting closer on that, and I'll show you our thinking on that as we go through each of these areas. So these are the renderings you saw earlier, but I'll add to those a few comments on the landscape. That low wall there, which helps meet the building grade, which is somewhat higher than Nuccio Parkway and the city park zone in front, also helps meet the grade of this large live oak, which is being preserved right here. So we've got adequate space all around the drip line of that existing tree, so that will bring a large mature tree on the site in day one. And then you see the planting, and our renderer is probably a little more exuberant than we're really intending. We'll probably do something a little simpler here, but there will be planting in above those low walls. And there also, and I'll show in detail later, there is a little publicly accessible gathering space right here off the sidewalk that's within the property line. So let's look at this zone along Nuccio in a little more detail. So this shows there are connections from the building, and this is common on both Nuccio and Scott, where you have entries to the units or doors to out of amenity areas on the patios. So it helps activate both of those street edges with a number of entry points. So you see a connection here, connection here. This is this little publicly accessible paved space where we'll probably use the hexagonal pavers, slightly elevated with a couple benches here right off of the sidewalk zone. There's the existing live oak, and then once again this somewhat varied planting along the sidewalk zone like we saw in the historic photos. Here's Fifth Avenue sloping up to meet the entry grade up here. This is another patio space off the lobby with the low walls with a coping stone, a cap on them, and then some planting backing up the wall. Here's that small little plaza space that would eventually will have this updated with hexagonal pavers. There's a couple benches that are part of that are within the site. So here's the south part of the Nuccio Parkway. There are a couple existing live oak in the city park zone, and then the planting along behind that wall, that low wall that extends all the way along here. So that's a fairly strong line that starts to create a more urban edge, even though the building is somewhat set back. And then you have that lobby space with the patio here I mentioned. And then these are amenity spaces for the residents with little patio areas that come outside. That helps activate that edge as well. This is a retail space with a patio space here. Maybe this is perhaps cafe, food and beverage, so that might be outdoor dining on this table if that's the tenant. And it's just up a few steps from the sidewalk. So the idea here, activate the street edge, particularly on these two key streets on the east and west. So here's the sections of this zone. You can see this is a subtle grade change, only typically a couple feet. So it's not so significant that you don't see those patios. It's just below eye level, so you still have a visual connection up to those spaces. That's the wide city park zone here. There's the sidewalk, and then planting between that low wall and the patio space. So here is Fifth Avenue. We call it the public realm, although it's actually a private street. But you see that connection between the north-south courtyards with the brick crosswalk, the varied planting along the street. Then here's where the private courtyard to the right, the fence for that is set back slightly amidst planting to kind of help disguise the fence, and then a gate right here. So this will be an important connection between the two buildings. So here is that street, and you notice we did kind of push back the zone that's publicly accessible to allow either bicycle parking or benches here, so to start to make a little varied kind of edge along Fifth Avenue. Once again, it starts to break down the scale, makes usable spaces, and creates a place to sit along the street edge. So here's an elevation view of that same Fifth Avenue. Here you can see the grade change from Nuccio up. And then the lighting, and this is a placeholder lighting. You'll show what we're thinking about later. It's more akin to the globe light that you saw earlier. About 65 feet apart. We've checked the photometrics on this. It works very well at that scale. It's only 16 feet high. And then the varied planting along the street edge. Here's the Fourth Avenue on the north side. Similar approach as you saw earlier. And once again, these street trees that we're selecting are all part of that list that was employed earlier in the 1920s and 1930s in Ybor City. Sable palms, the Japanese blueberry, plum tree, and where there's adequate space, live oak. So here's a view on Scott Street. This has some existing trees along it, along the existing curb. There also are rainwater gardens here, so this rendering is a little bit incomplete. But here, the low wall steps down just a couple feet, and those doors that Stephanie mentioned come out here towards the sidewalk. So here it is in plan. There's that low wall on this edge, and then it tends to meet grade down here. And then here's the connections out from the units towards the street. And here's this existing bioswale or rainwater garden that would be retained along Scott Street, as with the planting as well. So here's those conditions in section. You see it's quite a subtle grade change here, less than 2 feet down, but still treated with these low walls like you saw in the historic photographs. Here's once again, you saw this earlier, but the broader view of Scott Street with a varied planting along it. And there are some existing trees that should be showing up here as well. But that, once again, that varied streetscape look starts to correspond to the purposeful variation that is part of the architectural design of these elevations. So here's East Scott Street, again, in the southern block, also with connections out. Here it's a little more level, so we're meeting grade by going straight out from the building. Now the courtyards, well, these are private courtyards. The fence is set back slightly. You do have a view into these, so it does give you this there's a permeability and view into it, the spaces. And the idea here, this is the west courtyard in the north building. This is more of a kind of a quiet space, the more gathering space, public spaces in the east courtyard. So there's a walk through, places to sit, small groups. It's kind of a retreat or an oasis of sorts, whereas this one is more of a social space. It's a little bit larger. It's got a great focus in this beautiful existing live oak that we're carefully preserving all the grades around it, taking special measures in terms of the root zone, and then adding these bigger kind of gathering spaces with the lawn for yoga or whatever, and tables and fire pit here. So that's more kind of a meeting space. And that then connects down to the pool courtyard, which is shown here in the south building on axis with that entry from the north. So you do have views in. There's a key fountain, kind of landmark fountain that you'll see from the sidewalk looking into this. And then it transitions towards the more private spaces of the pool. So materials. This shows an example, another project we've done where we took the fence line, and you can see it's kind of embedded within vegetation, and there's a gate here. So that helps kind of reduce the sort of sense of that fence being a dominant element. It's kind of more part of the planting scheme. You see some of the sample furnishings here on the lower left. The low walls, which are treated with stucco or paint with a capstone. Capstone probably should be a little thicker than what's shown here. And then some of these selected areas off of the sidewalk, there may be an opportunity to use tile like you would see in Ybor City. There's a couple projects where we've used tile in the paving in selected areas. And then the lighting, key issue here. You know, we started with this one on the left, which is a fixture which has been used in historic districts, but it didn't capture the kind of form and appearance of the historic globe light. However, this one in the middle, it's a Polson fixture, a high-quality fixture. You can see it's kind of a half globe. So it does kind of echo the round shape of the globe. It also, you know, meets contemporary standards without dark sky, preserves dark sky, illumination downward, which is good in a residential area. So that's where we're leaning, is that one you see in the middle. Another candidate is this one on the right, very similar in terms of its performance criteria. So that's kind of where we're headed. You can see that it's somewhat akin to the historic globe, but also remember, we're making a transition to the southern end of the historic district to more blocks to come related to larger, taller buildings in gasworks. Plant material, once again, by and large, the palette derived from that historic plant list, you know, sable palm and the fern pine, plum pine, and other crepe myrtle. You've seen all of these plants in and around the district, and likewise with the ground cover and shrubs as well. similar list. But we're treating these in a very simple way without a lot of complexity on in the public areas, and then the complexity occurs within the private courtyards. So that's a summary of the approach to the urban landscape on this key site. And it's important because, of course, we're setting the stage for blocks to come as we go forward. So we're done?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, let me add, since we have time, let me add two things that I forgot to mention. In the staff report, historic materials found on the property, we have not found any. But we will endeavor to use them if we find them. Save them. I don't think there's any old brick roads there. Here we go with my coughing. And garage parking lighting. I wanted to cover that, but I can't right this second.
Garage park light.
You want to cover it, but you can't?
That's right.
Okay.
I can't, let me get one line. Sorry, I have a tree, I live with a tree, well, the tree has me is, I think, basically what.
Your drawing is triggering your photograph.
Yeah, this is true, right. I just have a really big tree that just loves to mess with me. The lighting in the parking lot, that was a concern. I know it is a concern with the larger projects. We have very minimal, and I can reference that if you want to, but I'll save it for later. We have very minimal openings in our garage. You know, we've got solid concrete walls up to the rail height for blocking cars. So we maybe have 3 or 4 feet of height in those openings. And they're broken down with columns on the regular bays with the frames, with the framed fabric. And that fabric is on the board, I think, somewhere. It's very dense. It's printable. It's very dense. So we don't believe that there's going to be much light coming out of the garage at all. And we have used minimum requirements for the lighting. There are light poles on the roof, but Michael, can you see if you can find a section of the parking garage? Our building is 5 stories tall, our residential buildings. The garage has a small area that says six stories, but that's at the roof of the 5th level. And it's just a small little area. So, oh yeah, we could do that. I don't think that's on though for us. I think there's a switch. Sorry.
Can you change to the Venmo, please?
Thank you. He's got it. He did it. Ron, it's done. So right in the center of the parking garage, the structural center are light poles here. This is sloping down. This is the highest point, and it's sloping down to half level at this southern end. So we have the light poles there, but they're right in the middle of the footprint and shouldn't be able to be seen. Those are the 2 items I think that were on the list that I didn't mention. And we'll be happy to take questions.
Okay, does that conclude your presentation? Okay, Mr. Vila?
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. Staff's finding that this application is consistent for final approval. To continue your approach towards final approval, page 3 and page 4 are going to be very instrumental to give you a template to move forward. The majority of the information was addressed. As you look on page 3, the application of standards, as we look at all projects for final approval, the height and width, the facade width, the setbacks, the spacing and alignment have all been decided through the PD process, and this is on page 3. To assist you moving forward, we have 2 bullet items remaining: the similarity of details and forms and the building materials. Along with commercial projects, we do get into the landscaping and pedestrian lighting as discussed this morning. So the focus of your questions should be the outstanding items that remain from preliminary approval. From preliminary approval, this is also on page 3, they were lacking some direction when they came forward initially as far as the illustrations to get their point across. I believe the visual tools that they provided today is a much better indication of the project and where it's going. There are 2 items that are foreign to the district, are the parking garages and the bridge crosswalk that should be sensitive in nature as they come forward. The eye should not be drawn to those architectural elements that are required, or just elements that are required for this project to move forward. So a sensitive approach. There was some referencing to the crosswalks. And the location of some of these amenities are very important. Don't put them on a corner or a busy street that they're seeing. You kind of incorporate it to the overall project that has been illustrated today as well. When we talked about internally, when we had these meetings prior to coming here, is the focus on the remaining items. I tried to keep everybody's direction to, as I said, the massing and the scale, that's been established already. So the experience, the pedestrian experience, and somebody, you know, the vehicular experience too, as you travel through here. We talked with the agent to expand the environment from Ybor City into this project coming forward, so incorporate the landscaping, the hardscape, the lighting, the retaining walls, the fencing that's there. There is a certain relationship that the public is going to experience here, and they should feel that they're part of Ybor, and obviously it's a new portion of Ybor, but then there's a private space as well, and those could have different language as they move forward. There was some discussion about signage, and it's very early on the program moving forward. The indication at this time, we always try to engage with the client to put the strong signage to define the buildings in place, and then as the tenants come, all of that's going to change. So if they have placeholders on the building, that should be expressed, and a couple of items were shown today. And then the lighting, I think, you know, once again, it's early on in the project, but there has to be a path for these items to show the quality of the project as well. I believe, you know, as I stated, you know, use the preliminary approval from the 25th. Some of the language there in discussion should be discussed a little further, and then staff has some conditions for the final approval. As I stated, I tried to keep my eye down to more the pedestrian. They talked about recreating streets. The grid was very important. As they created the grids, you know, they lost some of the square footage, but the circulation through the district and the respect for the grid was very important. So the language for the grid, we're not going to get brick streets back, but the reintroduction of the grid was very important in the success of this project. I believe at this time that concludes my portion, and I'll answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vila. You want to ask that now?
I do have a question for Ron.
Staff question.
Staff, you just mentioned about the brick streets, that we're not going to get brick streets. I'm just curious, two questions. When I last saw this project, we last saw it at the board, we weren't even sure if this residential street was going to be approved by DOT. Has that been approved? Is the street definitely going to be reintroduced, and it's going to be a public street or a private street controlled by the developer? And then secondly, to Ron, why can't we get brick streets in these new developments?
When we looked at redoing 21st and 22nd Street as it was a state road and we were working with FDOT, the incorporation of the brick street was a very challenging request. There's some challenges with the pedestrian crossing some of those streets at the crosswalks, and I know it's not the whole length of the street, but there's certain transportation issues. I think the incorporation of the granite curbing was very successful on 21st and 22nd, and that might be something that we could reestablish some of the historic materials.
Regarding the easements across the city property, that city park property, our attorney is working with the city attorney, that they're working on the agreements. It seems to be all doable. It's just not, finalized right now. But he assures me that will be finalized.
For public comment, anyone here from the public wishing to comment, please identify yourself. Seeing none, we'll start with questions of the commissioners of the applicant, starting on my left.
Thanks, Rich. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation and showing everything and the examples and all of that kind of stuff. I sincerely appreciate that. I do love your right-hand guy. He was Johnny on the spot showing stuff.
Everybody needs one.
I know,
Or
right?
two.
So I do appreciate that. I sincerely appreciate that. I think you guys did a good job implementing all of the history, the plant list, going back to some of those pictures and being able to relate that to what we were seeing here. I truly appreciated that. I also appreciate how you guys attempted to look at the garage. I remember talking about that last time we did that, that you were here. And I appreciate that you attempted to look at the garage to see what options could be, and that you also created motorcycle, bike spaces, scooter spaces, things like that, spaces for those things, because we always seem to ask those when it comes to these larger projects. I love your idea of pictures on the garage and that fabric that you passed. I'm assuming that's the fabric that it's going to be happening on. See, I told you something. So I appreciate that, and I like that you're bringing that history in. And I know this is being the huge project that it is, starting in the historic district and moving outside of the historic district. I truly appreciate the effort that you guys have given to make that transition, because it was touch and go there for a while. So I truly appreciate that. That is all I have, Rich. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity. No, I just wanted to voice my opinion, and I wanted to be first.
Thank you.
That's it. Thanks for letting me share.
I don't know if I missed it.
I know, right?
Whatever.
To echo Commissioner West, thank you for the thorough presentation with all the historical references. For the parking garage with the printable fabric that we'll mostly be seeing, obviously there are breaks between it. Is it stucco behind it? What's the material of the garage behind the fabric between all the panels that we'll
We
be
have
seeing?
this up, it is just precast concrete, painted. We have so little of it showing that we really didn't think that it required a special finish.
Yeah. And do you have a wall section that kind of goes through the garage, and so that we can kind of maybe see?
We have that detail sheet. Remember the garage detail? I think that's
The
kind
other
of,
side, but I mean, I was kind of interested through where, kind of the street facing sides, right? So.
nope. Yeah. We have this partial
Okay, yeah.
section at the door head, the overhead door head. You want me to zoom in?
Hey, can we go to, do you have to call out like number 4 as well? That we can zoom into that portion?
Yeah. Just moving it.
Yeah. Okay. Great, thank you. Come back to me. I have for now.
Thank you very much. Again, a very thoughtful presentation. I particularly enjoyed the, all the background and all the research and the thoughtfulness that you did regarding the historic landscaping. To me, that's a particularly fascinating subject, historic landscaping in historic districts, and it's much appreciated, all the thought that's going into it, especially since it's going to inform, the larger project that you're working on. I'm going to uncharacteristically ask only just a few questions, partly because it's such a thoughtful presentation. But one, if the architect could just speak a little bit about the choice of the brick color, because I think a lot of people, when they think of Ybor and brick, we tend to go more towards the redder brick, and you've chosen a different influence. So if you could just speak a little bit about the historical precedent. And then the other two questions perhaps are for the landscape architect. On the north side, there's no indication of a fence. I think you guys have control of the property to the north. It's probably, no?
No.
Okay, well, I'm just curious because there's residential properties there on the ground floor, and it seems like just from a safety point of view, you may have to introduce a fence, and we don't see one. So if you could address that. Secondly, there is on one of the ground floor plans that we were presented, on the north corner, there's a backflow preventer that doesn't show up in your more detailed landscaping plans. So I just hope you could maybe address how you're going to what extent you can shield it from the public with landscaping. And then my larger, more important, broader point, which is something that staff spoke to, appreciate all the effort that's gone on the pedestrian experience in regards to the landscaping and the hardscaping, and you have some great direction. I'm a little disappointed, though, I have to admit, with the limited use of brick. From what I can indicate, it's just in the crosswalks. And given, I don't know if the renderings are deceptive, but given the width of the streets, the use of the brick comes across as a little bit, chintzy. I can't think of another word, but it's minimized. I'm wondering if there's an additional opportunity to introduce the bricks. We were told it's challenging to do it on the street, but I think there might be other opportunities, and if you could speak to it, like the actual parking spaces could be brick, again, to bring the width of the road down, perhaps underneath the benches you're introducing in the more public realm, the bike racks, just as a way to bring a little bit more of that historic hardscape into these this new district that's part of the district. And basically, those are the only questions I have.
Okay, let me start with the brick. If brick is found on the site and it can be salvaged, we certainly would use that and use it, in those locations you mentioned, in the little plaza areas or bike parking. So far, as I understand, we haven't found brick.
Excuse me, but I think some drawings that were shown showed brick aprons. Maybe they're not historic bricks, but there does seem to indicate.
Well, in our plans, we are showing.
No, in the site photographs
Oh.
that we were shown, and that's why it became a part of the last.
Okay, so I'm not aware of what we've found so far on the site. Certainly, our aim was to reuse what brick would be salvaged. In terms of the crosswalks, I think they do look a little modest. Perhaps they should be a little bit wider.
Much better word, thank you.
The other element that's missing is normally when we do brick sidewalks, in order to prevent the bricks from migrating with vehicular traffic, is you have a fairly strong band on either side. So if you add a little more width and you add a very strong, wide paving band on those crosswalks, they become more prominent visually. That also helps mark the zone as a pedestrian zone, alert the motorist. So I think that will help those crosswalks appear more significant as part of the paving. But I certainly think as we go forward, those special areas, that little plaza on the southeast corner of the north building, or the bike parking, or entry zones, I think those are candidates for special paving, and that could perhaps be brick. I don't think we've kind of got very deep into that issue yet, but we have had preliminary discussions about doing something different where you enter the building, which historically you would find that all over cities as well as Ybor City, where you would have an entry space marked with something distinctive and
Yeah,
special.
even the tiles you reference,
Yes,
perhaps.
yeah. We're cautious of the tiles because of slippery factors in this climate and all the rain. But certainly, I think we can look at some of those special, small areas as opportunities for further use of brick. And, okay, the backflow preventer, certainly that needs attention in terms of planting, and of course, in this climate, you can plant something and kind of conceal it in pretty short order, the way things grow here. That zone to the north, we've looked at that in various ways, we've shown it planted. I suppose a fence is potential there, if required. Certainly, there is a security and a kind of a property line issue there. So perhaps that is another opportunity for extending our kind of language of fences on that north side. And I think that's a good comment, and I didn't really talk much about that zone.
We are hoping to inspire the owners of the property to the north to follow suit with the streets, so we really hope that sometime in the near future, those residences will, face streets. So hopefully, we have no control over that, but that is what we hope.
And if you could talk about the brick?
Yes, the brick. I have nothing against red brick, none of us do, but there's a lot of it in Ybor. And it just seemed to me that most of the new buildings we're getting are just red brick. And in some cases, that's the only historic aspect to the building. When we were conceptualizing the project and looking at the unique location, I started noticing how often you see blonde brick. And especially in this area with the Centro Storiano, there's two newer buildings, K-Force and the Children's Foundation, that building. Yeah, the Cuban Club. There's a lot of blonde brick, and I felt like it was the right thing to do. The owners preferred the softness of that as a transition material, as a transition color palette to, the rest of Tampa, the south part of their building, and we just kind of went with it. It just felt right.
Okay, I appreciate that. I know there are examples of the blonde brick. Usually they're on, more statement kind of buildings, but there are examples where they're more modest buildings. But I just wanted to understand the rationale.
Sure.
And also just perhaps because it might become part of the dialogue for future projects that come through as part of this new development. So, thank you.
Well, like everyone has said already, great presentation, very thorough. Everything that was on the list here, I think, has been covered. In one of your first slides, you had all these different style references. And when I was looking at that, my thought was, how is the team going to mesh all this together? I think you've done a great job of that. I do have a couple questions. The retaining wall, is there a retaining wall on the west side? Like on the one on the east side?
Yes,
Along
yes.
Scott?
The-
There
the-
is?
The grade on Scott Street at the north end is about 2 feet higher on the street than the building elevation. So there is a low retaining wall, but it doesn't appear in the renderings because it's dropping, not coming up.
Gotcha, okay, that's why. Also, my biggest concern with this project always was the parking garage, and I think you've done a great job. I know you couldn't bring it in more, it's very challenging because of the dimensions, but I think with adding the art and the historical references and all that, I think does a good job. The streetscape, landscape, all that, how it works, I think it's gonna be beautiful. Good job with that. And maybe this has been discussed before, but how are we handling retention, stormwater retention in this site?
Underground.
Underground chambers?
Yes, in the north courtyards and in this portion of Fifth Avenue, which may in the end mean that Fourth becomes public, but Fifth has to remain private. But still, it's open, it's not gonna be closed down or anything, it's just that city may not agree to maintain it with the retention under it.
I think going back to your comment on the crosswalks and the bricks and all that, if I know this is private road, but could we use that as also as a measure to slow down cars on that road? I mean, there's gonna be a lot of people moving north and south, street level probably.
I think
Is it doing that already? I know they were really minimal when I saw them on the rendering. Just
making the
curious.
paving textured can help slow traffic, but we also shown in the drawings, the crosswalk from that north courtyard to the south, to the pool courtyard, is shown at sidewalk level. So it's elevated up, tabled, as they say. So that is a more significant deterrent for
So
slowing
once I pass
traffic.
that one,
Yeah.
I can speed up all the way to the west, right? Just be mindful of that.
Well, you're not gonna
I
go
mean.
very far, because you'll get to Scott Street, and it's a rather small street.
Those were my comments on my questions. And are you gonna pass that window around?
Yeah, sure.
You have to.
My guy is gonna bring
The
it to you.
guy over there. That's all.
Thank you.
Yep.
So on this, this image that we have in front of us, what's the hatched area across from the entrance to the parking garage? Why
This
why
is
that
a
hatched?
street, this right here?
Yes,
That's a street loading zone.
loading zone.
Yeah.
Okay, so does that indicate brick like the other ones, or probably not?
No,
Because
it's just
not-
reserved
not
for
public.
loading,
Okay.
yeah.
And you say that Fifth Avenue is gonna be a private street. Really, it's open to the public, it's just the
Exactly.
ownership retains.
It's an
this, and
ownership
It's a
thing.
maintenance issue, really?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. AC units, where are they going?
We did not show you any plans. We just didn't think that that would be, they're all on the roof. But let me,
Everything?
all the AC units, yeah. Are on the roofs. I don't know if you can see
Okay, on
them.
the, like, the stands?
Yes, on stands.
And
The
they're all
required
small
stands.
units. What about the commercial spaces with the larger units? I guess they're over,
Yeah, those are provided for as well. We don't,
it's preliminary, but,
and also we've got a lot of zones in the amenity areas, and the retail space is only about 2,400 square feet.
and that's on the ground floor of the south building?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, this is a good image right here. So what's going on the south building on the eastern side? I noticed in the renderings there were some trees up there. Is there a rooftop garden?
Yeah,
up there
sorry,
that's-
I thought I mentioned that on one of the renderings, but yes, there is. Let me get the, oops. It's not, it's on the fourth floor, or the fifth floor.
Is it
So
like
there's a
clubhouse
notch
for the
out.
residents, or is it?
Yeah, for residents, it
For
is.
residents only, so it's not a public space?
No,
It's
it's
not
not
a
a-
restaurant or a rooftop bar or
No,
anything?
no.
Okay. We can go back to the site plan. Thanks for clarifying that. That helped
No
out
problem.
quite a bit. So I think Mr. Gilat's comment about the north side of the north building is, it seems like hasn't been as addressed as well. And we know it's still an edge, and I think it's kind of like, how do you treat that edge? Yes, that's the edge of your property, and you don't have control of that property, but now all of a sudden everything else is very urban, and a tight grid, tight blocking, and now all of a sudden we have yards there. I mean, I'd say there's probably, 15 feet of yard there. I think we'd probably like to get a better understanding of how that's gonna be treated. I understand that you don't have control of that northern parcel, but that's the end of your project, that's considered the back door. I just don't want it to be an afterthought or no thought in how you're gonna address that.
We
sometime.
agree. What we didn't mention is there's a public easement. I can't remember if it's,
And we removed those walkways as well that were previously shown, so that they're no longer walkouts.
yeah,
Back space now, it's just.
yeah, but the easement prevents us from doing,
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
come to the microphone so that this is
I'm
continuing to
sorry.
be recorded?
And he wasn't sworn?
John Cleary Kettler. So there were
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
Sorry.
And that was just an internal conversation.
The testimony you provided is only the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes. John Cleary with Kettler. We had previously shown walkouts on that side, and we've now switched those to, we've eliminated those, so it's now just a grass area. And as Stephanie mentioned before, we would like to preserve that ability for a potential street to happen above that, and so adding some type of structure there could potentially prevent that in the future. And there is an easement that's not shown here for a water line that's running under there as well, which is preventing any kind of structure from being on top of that.
And it's keeping us pulled away from the north property line too.
So that, okay, so the water line's on your property covered by an easement by the city?
Yes, I'm sorry, we don't have this survey information.
Okay, that's fine. I think it's just something that I think we're probably gonna have to hand that off to staff to work with them on how we finally address that. I think, not necessarily in Ybor, but I think of a couple examples in South Tampa where it's just like that one edge of the building got forgotten and it just gets really suburban really fast. And I think you're on top of it. I just want to make sure we
Sure,
bring
no
that
problem.
up. Okay, covered that. Let's go talk about the parking garage. I think you really made a nice effort there to work with that. I think that was one of my major concerns before of how we're addressing that. I think in maybe moving forward, you know, when you start looking at other blocks when you're gonna have a parking garage, I'd say we'd like to look for a little bit of a setback there to differentiate that mass, that volume. But I like what the solution that you're proposing here. You know, something that's applied, it breaks up that facade, gives it a little bit more depth. The historic images, it automatically reminds me of the mural on Adamo that got painted with the historic context. So I think, you know, I'm seeing a lot of your context for your historic. We heard that in your first presentation, even with your PD.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that you're well aware of that. I like the historic context there. So if we do some kind of public art or some kind of installation, I'm okay with where you're placing that garage. And I understand the dynamics. You lose 2 feet, you're losing the volume there. The overhead, I'm done. I got one more question on that one.
Oh, on this?
Overhead coiling door. What's going on with that? Is that just the public entries? Is that just the trash loading zones? Where is that going to be used? Typically, you don't find those in the district. And I just noticed it on your preliminary packet with the door schedule. So you have some overhead coiling. Are they thin slats? Are they thick slats? What are you thinking?
We've got cut sheets. I've got a folder of,
Like the resident entry to the parking garage, does that have an overhead coiling door? Is it?
yeah, it will have an open coil.
Great.
Yeah, but I'll tell you that it'll be there, and we've got, it may not be clear on the drawing, but there's two, we split that opening into two smaller openings.
Mm-hmm.
And these doors will be on those, on that main entry, but they will be rarely down, you know, because inside the garage, about 30 cars in, we have arms that prevent anybody but residents from going up. So those are those kind. Now for the other trash and loading, these are, you know, your typical rolling metal doors, which we're going to try to paint out as best we can.
Okay. And I can see that in your material palette. I think your paint colors are going to come through everywhere if you choose to do that black, or maybe it blends in a little bit more,
exactly.
softer tone there. I mean, you have a palette to choose from to work off of anyways. And I think you're doing a responsible thing there because they're normally mounted there, but the further you can set those back and inset on the inside face of that structure, it gets that out of the public domain, out of the public way. So I just make sure that you're aware of that and push that back as much as possible. I think you clarified in the plans, but there's no, all around the pool area and the courtyards, those are all living units. The parking garage doesn't overlook the courtyard.
No,
correct?
that's correct.
Let's see. So are these buildings, masonry or stick construction? I'm seeing a little bit of both.
There's stick construction.
Okay,
The north building is completely stick, but the south building, because it has other uses in it, has a concrete podium at the level that separates the
Retail plant.
residences from the,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so detailing's gonna be a little bit different. I think you'll need to work with staff, and I think you're well aware of, you know, insetting the windows to make sure we have a uniform face
Yeah.
going up. Okay. Thank you for clarifying the details on the windows. I think before we had the detail with the steel channel there.
Yeah.
Does that steel channel, is that completely inset in the brick and the stucco, or does that extend as like a pronounced header?
It's inset, it does not extend past the window frame.
Okay, so for the brick, it looks like it's flush, but with the stucco, it looks like the steel's gonna stick out a little bit.
No, we have it pushed back as well on that.
Okay,
Well, I lied. We don't, we have it
and it's, yeah,
pulled out.
and I think that's fine. I just wanna make sure I wasn't sure if it extended past the window or if
Right, no,
was
it
straight
is
within the
flush
window
with
bay.
the,
Okay, and you showed some of the reveals between the window spacing of the brick where you're setting that back half inch or an inch just to get a shadow line. Where does that occur?
Yeah,
That's strictly on the south building, or is that both
it
buildings?
is strictly on the south building.
Okay, I don't think it shows up in the renderings too.
This is south building elevation. Is it on there? Yeah, it wasn't showing up so well on the renderings either. So where we have the 5-story sections in this brick area, we have these windows paired, and these windows paired. So it's a typical detail in the brick areas. These should also, all of these should be paired up in the brick.
Okay, and everything on the ground floor is all storefront, black to match the windows above, or, because you're gonna use windows on the residential levels, but below, it'll be storefront to match?
Yes, black storefront. I have a
Okay.
cut sheet if you want it.
Okay, just like 2-inch sticks?
Mhm.
Okay. So I saw some kind of mixed details in there for the canopies over some of the residential entries. You had the triangular type of hipped ends, and then some of the renderings had them shown as just cantilevered.
Yeah, again, I apologize. It's just almost impossible to get everything done. But I will tell you that, I will show you that the sloped roofs, small sloped roofs that we have are at these 3 entries on the north building.
Okay.
This has a bridge connecting it, so, and those are the places where that is. At the south building, we have the flat, bar-supported roofs.
Cantilevered
Yeah.
canopies, okay. So pedestrian bridge, I like how that's coming along. It's simpler, it's a lighter weight. I think everything's gonna be black or a dark bronze there, including the roof.
Yes, everything, black is our choice for
Okay.
windows and everything, not dark bronze.
So keep that palette consistent throughout, okay?
Yeah.
And I like the screening of what you're doing there. I was kind of wondering if it needed like a concrete pediment base, but I think the slimmer nature of going into the ground and burying everything works fine there. So I thank you for clarifying that. And
No,
what that's-
no problem.
what that's coming
And we
together.
did consider the concrete base, but prefer the
Yeah, I think some of
simpler.
your precedents, you can see over there, Centro does that. And
Yes.
is there any decoration on those concrete columns like we see there, or are they just straight posts?
The steel columns?
Yeah.
No decoration. They're just plain, simple, round. Mhm.
I think you're fine with that, I just wasn't sure if that was.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna jump over to a couple of site landscaping issues. So that you had some coping stones on some of the retaining walls, you were saying that they were a little thin. Is that like a cast concrete, or is that a different material that you're introducing there?
Yeah, we were debating that this week, whether it should be a precast or a stone. And the reason I mentioned that it looked thin in that particular precedent image, it looked a bit fragile for something in the public realm. Typically, we like those caps to be a little bit deeper, 4 to 6 inches, looks kind of more appropriate in the public realm, and that looked more kind of residential or interior courtyard scale. There it is. So we haven't settled on whether precast or stone kind of makes the most sense there.
And they're gonna be painted, is there gonna be a stucco finish, or is that?
Well,
We got that
that's the
far.
other part of the discussion, whether it's painted concrete or a stucco finish on the wall surface. So I haven't settled on those decisions yet.
Okay. Trees, Ricky did a nice job finding all those historic references. I think one other tree that you may wanna consider that's being introduced within the district for replacement is olive trees.
Okay.
So I think the track record so far with those is very well received.
I mean,
I think
the
they've got a
classic
nice-
olive or a Russian olive?
Oh, I don't.
Okay, good. Sorry.
Yeah, I
We'll,
don't
we'll,
know.
we'll talk to Ricky about that.
Through YCDC, they're doing a lot of things
Okay.
with the tree replacement, so there are olive trees,
Yeah.
and you certainly have if
Yep.
you go back to your immigrant cues for the district, I mean, I think the olive trees with the Italians go a
Sure.
long way anyways, too, so it's a nice touch. And I think they weather well and it's,
Oh, yeah.
so.
Typically, they're more adapted to drier climates, so that's why it's probably a cultivar or a variety of olive. But
I'll leave that.
we'll look into it, yeah.
It's a black olive or a green olive.
Right,
I like both black and
I
green
know,
olives.
so do I.
Go ahead.
it's, pizza versus liquids. I'm looking at your, site lighting, the globes. I think that's got a nice feel to it, because, you're outside the district, you don't wanna be exactly within the district and do the 5 globe light thing. Maybe some of the courtyards, you introduce those elements to bring in a few special areas. But I like where that's going. My question on that light in the middle, does that globe, the top part, that could either be solid opaque, or it could be like semi-translucent, or?
It looks white. I don't believe it is meant to disperse illumination, because that's inconsistent with the performance of how you deal with modern lighting. So, but it does look rather bright. So it might have a slight, a bit of brightness to it, but the aim is that light go downward, like you see in the bottom image.
And I think the solid one, staying with your dark
Yeah.
bronze palette, I think that works better. I didn't see too much about the site furniture, saw some pictures, but they were more historic references, but I think you're gonna continue that black color through
Correct.
bike racks, benches, we saw that with the fences, and just
Yep.
maintain that palette, I mean. there's
And,
plenty
and
of
maintain the
precedent from the
proportion of those historic benches, even if they're slightly simpler.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging to hear that we're headed in the right
Yeah, I think
direction
that's
here,
a-
because this is a challenging area to try to relate to something that is kind of idiosyncratic in a way,
Right.
and find something that can be employed over several blocks, so.
Yeah,
that's
and I
encouraging.
think where that kind of works into is the top of the garage, you're gonna have to do some lighting on that upper
Yeah.
level. Thank you for mentioning the point about not seeing light out sides of the garage, which other projects in town have a lot of. But this one really seems to cut off that light, so I think that within the garage is gonna be well contained, but I'm more concerned about the light poles on the top. I know they have to have like a minimum head height to get up and disperse the light, but I tend to wanna keep those lower, maybe 12 feet.
Sure.
So that they're hid behind the parapet walls, you're not gonna see that, like
Gotcha.
AC units and stuff, so. But if you wanna use that same language up there, I think that's certainly appropriate. Okay, any other, I'm done with my questions.
Just to continue off lighting, for the pedestrian bridge, how is that gonna be lit? Is it all gonna be recessed cans, or?
Yes, recessed or shallow surface black cans, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just one more question, and I prefer to bring up this discussion while it's still open, that you can respond, because we have spent some time talking about the pedestrian bridge. I still think it's a little bit too Miesian, meaning modern, for those Mies van der Rohe. The proportions, especially since it's elevated to allow for, trucks and things, the columns are rather elongated. And we'd asked if there's any articulation or point, there's not. But I still think, especially with some of the examples, the more modern examples you showed, I don't think it needs to get too historicized, but I think just in terms of proportions and bringing it down to scale, introducing some kind of X bracketing below it, you know, or a Y, kind of similar to what you're proposing with the modern interpretation of the canopies. I think that would go a long way at the pedestrian level. Even some of the renderings you showed in that condition, you know, it's a lot of mass hanging over. So maybe just some simple X brackets or Y brackets along the bottom in particular, or maybe even, yeah, I'm more concerned about the underside. And then,
Or maybe would you prefer an arch kind of a structure to bring that down a little bit?
I don't think it needs an arch. I
Okay.
mean, that would be up to you, and you could review it with staff, but I just think it needs some kind of articulation. I realize you don't need it for structural purposes, but.
You mean on the ceiling, or are you saying
Well, I'm talking about sort of
below
like
the-
off the columns,
I
like
see.
maybe there's an X or a Y, just something to kind of like,
Yeah, we just have a clearance,
yeah, and maybe
know,
you could
we
do
have
it
to-
over the sidewalk, it's just
Yeah,
a
I
suggestion.
gotcha.
It seems in terms of scale, and then I think a way of breaking down that column, it doesn't have to get decorative, but again, like maybe the column does get a little wider as it hits the floor to, you know, at 3 feet or at 4 feet, just to relate to the pedestrian scale. Doesn't have to be overly ornate or Victorian by any means, but just in terms of, you know, you have to think about how things would have been built in the historic periods of Ybor. And although we have modern construction materials, we still, those kind of breaks in scale help break things down and make it a little bit more human.
Yeah, it's just funny that the more I looked at balconies, and, you know, I've been looking at balconies here for 40 years, but the more frequent it was just to have a plain, this has a break there. I see what you mean there.
Just some kind of,
but
it can
so
even
many
be a
of them are
reveal,
just-
it doesn't have to get bigger, you know, it
Yeah.
can be a reveal
Yep.
or something, but.
I mean, going back to the signage, going back to the signage on the pedestrian areas, and I don't mean signage, but just reduce the scale on that side with, I mean, you see it there with banding coming across from the building to the columns and all that. There's an opportunity there. That's all.
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't think it needs to get historicized, but just sort of break down the scale of
I
it.
understand.
Okay, thank you. I think that would go a long way for that condition and the connection, because it really is connecting these two buildings too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we tell her less, you know, well, me seeing too, less is more, so, you want to minimize this, right? But maybe just, you know, maybe the columns get a little thicker at the base, just to bring back the pedestrian scale, but I think you're gonna have your minimum clearance there, so you're not really able to hang too much below there.
Right.
But you can over the sidewalk, right?
Sure.
Yeah, but
Your
it's.
clearance is concerned in the middle of the road, so you could.
But that would mean that we'd have something, you know, only here and here, and nothing, it would just be a little, well, anyway,
I think
we'll
that
look
might
at
be a
it.
solution, yeah.
You know,
We'll put some gingerbread on it and, and, no, I understand.
Okay, any more questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna, yep. So you have a few minutes for, you've heard our questions. If you have a few moments that you could summarize any comments or rebut anything, and then we'll close the public hearing.
No, we just want to thank you very much for helping us out, and participating in the process, and especially having an additional hearing for these busy times. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing at this point in time. We can start with our discussion of the case, starting on my right with Mr. Perez.
I think we've covered in the discussion all of the salient points, and I think the project, it appears to be almost ready for a final with just some, you know, reiterations of some of the concerns we have, and, you know, to have staff approve all the final packets, because it sounds like they're still in the process of making final selections in terms of specific materials and finishes and things like that.
Yeah, I think, just as I'm gonna pass it on to you in a minute, but, you know, we did a preliminary approval before, so now this is a final approval, so when we make a motion, we need to address a lot of those comments that were brought up as part of the preliminary, conditions, and then other things that we discussed today as well.
No, very much agreed, especially if they can work with staff and bring all the historical precedents that they kind of showed us. Thank you for very thorough, but it's also very clear compared to the previous presentation, and really appreciate that, and the project's coming along very nicely.
I don't have anything to add other than what these gentlemen have said.
Yeah, and I think, thank you for the additional time to pull stuff together. You know, I think it's one of those things that, yes, you addressed a lot of our concerns and addressed our questions. The drawings were much easier to follow this time. It's a large project with a number of different faces. I think, you know, it's a combination of seeing it again, getting it in front of us again, as well as additional clarification on some of these items. So, and I think we fine-tuned a lot of things that were kind of up in the air, and I think that'll continue to happen, working with staff as this project moves forward, and you move into the adjacent blocks as well. So,
I also just wanted to reiterate, I really do like the modern take on the globe lighting as well, and the whole new modern standards and dark skies and all that kind of thing is a great addition. The conditions. Like
Yeah, I mean,
that. So, before we craft the motion, maybe go through the conditions.
We'll help you with the conditions.
You want to add? Okay, I'll make the motion. All right.
I think it's easier, Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. So instead of having someone make a motion and discuss conditions while making a motion, it's easier to flush that conversation out before the motion is made. Just,
yeah, then we'll go down this checklist.
Just go
Let's
down
give
that
our,
entire
you know,
checklist. Okay. If it's written out in front of me, that's pretty easy. All right, so final approval with conditions, move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in BLC 22-59 for the property located at 1015 Lily White Court with the following conditions. That note is added to the site plan to authorize the Barrio Latino Commission the ability to adjust the setbacks on all elevations for a distance of up to 10 feet to enable the development of building elements that characterize the Ybor City Historic District, and that will facilitate the architectural review process. Retain and reuse our historic brick pavers currently within the site boundaries. Well, they're not coming back, right? So 3D renderings, all that kind of stuff. That the applicant work with staff to, let's see, provide a complete site package with the emphasis on redevelopment of 4th and 5th Avenues. Provide staff with final wall section details, final bridge detailing, final garage detailing to include how it interfaces with the southernmost portion of the W1 property. Let's see, historical material retention plan, relationship of the garage to both sides of the property line, and then the final material selection, color palette, hardscape, and landscape plans to staff.
There's anything in here. These are the
Thanks,
steps.
yeah. Let's see. And that they provide staff with all samples and examples of street, pedestrian, and public lighting fixtures, detailing of roadway improvements, including street signs and poles, crosswalk detailing, to provide all hardscape and landscape to be shown on the site plan, and to include species and location, include all site amenities, submit, let's see, and just to submit any additional architectural details at windows, corners, louvers, lighting on garage, and to work with staff for a complete sign package. Put your own color palette, and then incorporate materials consistent with historical fabric for crosswalk curbing, ADA ramps, and landscaping to be period appropriate. And then illustrate garage lighting sensitive to surrounding environment and provide location on rooftop, which I think they did today. Okay, because based upon the finding of the fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Ybor City design guidelines of the City of Tampa based on the following reasons: that it conforms with the design criteria for new construction, and it fits within the historical context for height and width, facade width, setback, spacing, alignment, similarity of details and forms, and building materials.
Yeah. To the applicant, there were a number of conditions that were placed on. I think they were pretty minor. We regurgitated a lot of the information that were preliminary comments, but most of that has been addressed. But there's a few conditions on there, working with staff to approve final material palette and finishes and some of the architectural details. Are you okay with all the conditions placed upon this?
Yes,
motion?
we are.
I'll entertain a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you very, very much. And look at the time. You made it.
Seeing that we have no more business in front of us, we are adjourned. Thank you.
I'll be hoping, I'll be praying I'll never see your face no more.